us how that injury was caused?
That was him hitting the front of my head into the floors in front of the stairs.
18 years in prison without the possibility of parole. What could someone possibly do to deserve this? Once you see everything he did before that verdict, you might think he got off easy. Let's talk about the long, messy road that brought the 90-day Fiancé cast member here. Geoffrey Paschel's story in the 90-day Fiancé universe is one of those cases where the audience went from slightly suspicious to deeply uncomfortable to downright horrified as the truth slowly peeled back layer by layer. What makes his downfall so fascinating is that he walked into the franchise acting like the reformed country boy with a past. The kind who tells you he has done some things he's not proud of, but insists he is a changed man now. Someone who has learned from his mistakes, grown as a person, and is finally ready for love.
So I started dealing drugs. I was eventually caught. I was sentenced to 30 months in prison. I'm not proud of my past. I'm not. But it is my past. And I have to accept it. I just hope that she will.
He positioned himself as this rugged, misunderstood father from Tennessee, a man who had been through heartbreak and was searching for something real, something pure, something healing. The show presented him as the devoted single dad with a few rough edges, the kind of man who would protect his family, work hard, and do whatever it took to be there for the woman he loved. He traveled all the way to Russia to meet the beautiful and energetic Varya, convinced that she was the dream he deserved. But what the audience did not realize, and what Varya herself clearly had no idea about, was that this entire soft, reformed, nice guy image was the thinnest layer of wrapping paper on top of a very long and very dark history. His season aired like any other at first. Geoffrey arrived in Russia, kissed Varya hello, did the sightseeing, met the friends, and went through the messy reality TV motions. But almost immediately, cracks began forming in his story. One of the first red flags hit when Varya's friends started asking him normal questions, the kind anyone would ask when their friend is dating a man from another continent with a vague past and an intense romantic storyline. These were not aggressive questions. They were basic. Do you have secrets? What kind of life did you have before this relationship? What challenges have you faced? Instead of answering reasonably, Geoffrey snapped.
Have you any secrets that you don't say, Varya?
I have a past, but I don't talk about my past. I don't ask about her past.
Но прошлое нас определяет. Это странно, что он не хочет о нем говорить.
There's no reason I should be interrogated like this.
He acted like questions were attacks, like simple curiosity was an interrogation. And rather than calmly explaining anything about himself, he became defensive and angry. He stormed out of the dinner, leaving Varya to apologize for the mess he made. And that moment was very telling, because it showed how quickly he flipped into victim mode the second anyone asked him something he did not want to answer. He played the wounded and offended partner like it was second nature. According to him, everyone around him was overreacting, misunderstanding him, or pushing him too hard. Yet he was the one raising his voice, blaming Varya, and making the entire situation about his feelings, not hers. He then turned the tables by accusing Varya of being dishonest for not mentioning she had spoken to other Americans online before him.
It's not funny.
Спокойно.
This is ridiculous. Man, you lied to me. I'm done. This is bull.
He acted like it was some betrayal, even though he had mountains of secrets himself. The hypocrisy was impossible to ignore. Varya's friends were pretty much the audience's voice at that moment. They could see he was hiding something, and that his emotional reactions were not normal. A few days later, he finally decided to open up to Varya, admitting that he used to sell drugs and had spent time in prison.
I went to prison for a while, for a couple years, for selling drugs. I wanted to tell you about this before.
I can't believe you didn't tell me that.
But the way he delivered this so-called confession was calculated. It wasn't the raw, vulnerable truth. It was a rehearsed monologue, polished enough to make him look remorseful, without actually exposing who he really was. He framed it like a brief detour in his past, a youthful mistake, a small bump in the road that he had grown from. He spoke like someone telling a mildly embarrassing story from college, not a man with a deep, violent, and extensive criminal history. What he didn't mention, of course, was everything else. He conveniently skipped over the severity of his past charges, the number of lives his choices had impacted, and the way his behavior had continued long after the era he claimed to be done with. He left out the violence, the manipulation, the patterns with women, the arrests, the restraining orders. He shared the version of the truth that made him look like a misunderstood man who made a few bad decisions, not the truth. When Varya broke down crying and told him that her cousin had died from the exact substances he used to sell, the moment should have cracked him open. That is where a genuinely changed man would crumble, take accountability, acknowledge the pain he helped cause, and show real remorse. But Geoffrey didn't do any of that. Instead, he minimized everything, downplayed the severity, and treated her emotional reaction as if she was being unreasonable. He acted confused as to why she was so upset, even though her pain was a direct reflection of the world he had once contributed to. And then, predictably, he turned the conversation back to himself. How he had changed, how he had grown, how none of it mattered anymore, how he wasn't the man he used to be. He positioned himself as the victim of his circumstances, the hero of his own redemption arc, and the man she should trust because he claimed to be different now. It was manipulation wrapped in sincerity, which is the most effective kind. And because Varya was hopeful and deeply invested in the relationship, she forgave him. She saw his tears, she heard his trembling voice, and she believed she was witnessing genuine vulnerability. But what she didn't understand is that Geoffrey had long perfected the art of the partial confession. Tell just enough to earn sympathy. Tell just enough to seem honest. Tell just enough to make your partner feel like you're letting them into your inner world. But never ever reveal the full truth. Never reveal the monstrous parts. Never reveal the patterns of violence or the depth of the manipulation, because once the full picture emerges, people run. This tactic is extremely common among abusers with long histories. Selective honesty, strategic guilt, emotional theatrics. It creates the illusion of growth while hiding the reality that nothing has changed at all. Geoffrey insisted he was ashamed. He insisted he was better now. He insisted he had transformed into a man worthy of love. But behind the scenes, the truth was far more sinister. He wasn't confessing. He was priming her. He was planting the seeds of justification for everything she didn't know yet. And she walked right into it, because everything she thought she was forgiving was only the surface. She had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. The audience probably thought things were messy but manageable at this point. Some viewers even liked him, thinking he was a flawed guy, trying to put his life back together. But the truth was already unfolding on social media, because viewers began digging into public records, court documents, and old legal filings. And what they found was horrifying. Most people expected maybe a few misdemeanors or small-time mistakes. Instead, they unearthed a massive criminal record and a history of deeply disturbing behavior. While he was on the show charming audiences and proposing to Varya, he was also dealing with active serious charges for aggravated kidnapping, domestic assault, and interference with an emergency call involving his then-fiancée, Kristen. These were not old charges from decades ago. This was happening 1 month before he flew to Russia to film the show. Even more disturbing was the fact that he was still legally married to a different woman, a 19-year-old he had married when he was 36 and whose relationship with him had involved restraining orders. So, in summary, when Geoffrey went to Russia to meet Varya, he was legally married to wife number whatever, engaged to Kristen, facing felony charges for allegedly brutalizing Kristen in the aftermath of multiple relationship breakdowns, fathering kids with several women, lying about his past to everyone involved, and presenting himself to TLC producers as a newly reformed man ready for love. The level of manipulation was staggering. His exes later revealed that this wasn't some one-time slip-up or a single toxic relationship gone wrong. Geoffrey had a long, well-documented pattern of juggling multiple women at once. He perfected the ability to make every woman in his orbit feel like they were the only one who truly understood him, the only one he could be himself with, the only one who saw the real him. To one woman, he was the wounded single dad who needed unconditional love. To another, he was the misunderstood tough guy with a tragic past. To another, he was the reformed bad boy looking for redemption. He could shapeshift emotionally depending on what worked on that specific woman. His exes described the same formula over and over: the intensity, the charm, the sudden future planning, the dramatic declarations of commitment. The moment they pulled away even slightly, he flipped the script and became the victim. "You're abandoning me. You don't believe in me. You're just like everyone else who has hurt me." It was emotional manipulation disguised as vulnerability, and it worked on almost all of them until the moment it didn't. Kristen, the woman at the center of the felony assault case, gave testimony that silenced the courtroom. When she told her story, you could feel the air shift. There was no exaggeration, no theatrics, no confusion. Just a woman retelling the moment she genuinely believed she might die. Her description of the night she tried to leave Geoffrey was beyond horrifying. She said he snapped. She explained how he beat her, dragged her across the floor, slammed her into walls and furniture, choked her, and physically blocked her from calling 911. She lost consciousness more than once. She woke up in different places in the house with no memory of how she got there. The photos of her injuries were so severe that when the jury saw them, several people reportedly reacted in shock. You could see it in their faces. The energy in the courtroom changed instantly. There was no way to minimize what happened. This was not a mild altercation. This was not a heated argument. This was sustained brutal violence. Kristen described running barefoot into her neighbor's house at 2 a.m. with nothing but sheer instinct telling her to get out. No phone, no keys, no coat. She hid behind cabinets, shaking, begging her neighbor to help her, convinced that Geoffrey might come after her.
She ran out of her house at 2 o'clock in the morning. Barefoot, no phone, no keys, nothing. She ran over to her neighbor's house. She begged her to let her in. Miss Gooch calls 911. You're going to hear that Miss Wilson was so scared. When she got to Miss Gooch's house, she hid behind cabinets.
When the police knocked on the door, she did not open it at first. She was too terrified to move. It took multiple rounds of the officers identifying themselves before she believed she was safe enough to come out. This wasn't just physical violence. It was psychological terror, the kind that sticks with someone for years. And yet, even with all of this, Geoffrey sat in court insisting that he was the real victim. He claimed Kristen injured herself by running into a wall while drunk and emotional. He claimed she fabricated the entire thing out of jealousy. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. He claimed she was framing him. He even tried to insinuate that she was unstable, hoping the jury would latch onto that and ignore the mountain of evidence. But the evidence did not support a single one of his claims. Her injuries matched her story perfectly. The patterns, the placement, the severity. None of it aligned with his "she bumped into something" fantasy. The broken items in the home lined up exactly with what she described happening. Her panicked behavior at her neighbor's door matched someone fleeing from an immediate threat. The neighbors testified that she was trembling, bleeding, and begging for help. The police officers who responded also testified that her fear was genuine, her injuries were fresh, and her story was consistent from the very first moment she spoke.
That's how that injury was caused.
That was him hitting the front of my head into the floors in front of the stairs.
Another angle of that.
Yes, it is. My bet, I can only assume this is from being dragged. I have the same marks on, or similar marks on my knees, and it felt like rug burn.
At your back.
Yes, it is.
Do you recall how those came to be?
Just being shoved into walls and furniture repeatedly.
The injuries to your face, did they kind of evolve over the days following?
Yes, they did. That's why they had forensics come back out and take pictures, because the bruising had kind of changed.
Bruising on your hands?
Yeah, from catching myself, or attempting to catch myself. Both of my palms right there were bruised.
And then came the detail that sealed his fate. Kristen willingly handed over her phone to be forensically examined. She had nothing to hide. Geoffrey, on the other hand, refused to turn over his. Instead, he presented a series of screenshots that looked suspiciously altered, missing data, cropped portions, timestamps that made no sense, formatting errors that screamed manipulation. The jury saw right through it. It took them only 2 hours to reach a unanimous guilty verdict on every count. 2 hours! For a trial of that magnitude, that is shockingly fast. It means the jury walked into deliberation already leaning heavily in one direction, and it only took a short conversation to finalize it. And when the judge read the verdict out loud, Geoffrey's face changed in the most revealing way. You could literally see the mask fall. The confidence evaporated. The practiced charm disappeared. His eyes darted, his expression tightened, and the realization washed over him all at once.
To count one, how does the jury find? We, the jury, find the defendant, Geoffrey Paschel, guilty of aggravated kidnapping.
And as to count 2, how does the jury find?
We, the jury, find the defendant, Geoffrey Paschel, guilty of domestic violence.
And as to count 3, how does the jury find?
We, the jury, find the defendant, Geoffrey Paschel, guilty of interference with emergency call.
Thank you. Please be seated, everyone. If you please pass those verdict forms to the court officer. If that is the verdict of each and every juror, would you please signify by raising your right hand?
The manipulation that worked on girlfriends, fiancés, young women, producers, and random strangers online did not work on a room full of people who saw the evidence laid out plainly in front of them. For once in his life, he couldn't talk his way out of it. He couldn't charm, guilt trip, or gaslight his way to freedom. He was taken into custody immediately, and that was the moment his entire illusion of control shattered. And in early 2022, the judge gave him 18 years in prison with no possibility of parole. As of November 2023, Geoffrey remained behind bars, serving his sentence in a Tennessee correctional facility. But prison did not stop the world outside from moving on, and it certainly did not stop Varya from continuing to live her life in a way that baffled a lot of viewers. Instead of distancing herself, instead of acknowledging the reality of the conviction, she leaned even more publicly into her loyalty to him. In a video she shared about her life, her future, and her plans, she casually referenced the situation with a line that instantly went viral. "My man is currently serving time in prison," she said. Her unwavering support remained one of the most controversial parts of this entire story, especially considering the severity of the charges. In late 2023, when Varya received news that Geoffrey's appeal had been officially denied, this was the moment many assumed she would finally walk away, that the denial would snap her out of the fantasy, that he might be home soon, or that this was some kind of misunderstanding. But instead, she stayed. She doubled down. She posted about staying strong, staying hopeful, and believing in his eventual return, even though the legal system had just confirmed that Geoffrey would not be leaving prison anytime soon. In May 2024, new rumors began circulating online that Geoffrey had been involved in a prison stabbing incident. The story spread quickly across fandom pages and gossip accounts because of how intense it sounded. But according to Project Casting blog, an internal investigation cleared him of any involvement. Then, in July 2024, Varya stunned the internet again. While Geoffrey remained incarcerated, she posted a series of photos celebrating what would have been their 5th anniversary. 5 years of a relationship that had survived long distance, reality TV, public backlash, legal battles, and now an 18-year prison sentence. She looked back on their history with a kind of soft, quiet nostalgia, writing, "It's hard to believe it's been 5 years." She thanked him for the impact he had on her life, saying, "You always tell me I'm the best woman in the world, and sometimes I almost believe you. Love you more and more every day." Whether it was devotion, denial, trauma bonding, or a desperate attempt at staying in the United States, Varya remained publicly committed to a man who would not walk free until he was in his 60s. After his sentencing, the conversation shifted to TLC's screening process. How did a man with active felony charges get cast on an international reality show? Why did they air his storyline knowing the charges were public? Why was he allowed to propose to Varya on TV while legally married to another woman and engaged to the victim of his assault? Fans were outraged. They felt TLC had put vulnerable cast members, including Varya, in harm's way, and the network's decision to air the storyline anyway made the entire season feel disturbing in hindsight. The downfall of Geoffrey Paschel is one of the few times viewers watched a reality TV villain experience real-life justice. His entire persona fell apart under scrutiny, and what was left was the truth. A man who spent decades hurting people, finally facing decades behind bars.